From Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, this by Lewis Carroll. This is chapter 3, A Caucus Race and a Long Tail. There were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank, the birds with draggled feathers and the animals with their fur clinging close to them, all dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. The first question, of course, was how to get them dry again. They had a consultation about this, and after a few minutes, it seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them her whole life. Indeed, she had quite a long argument with the Lorry, who turned sulkily and would only say, "I'm older than you and must know better." At this, Alice would not allow without knowing how old it was, and as the Lorry was positively refused to tell its age, there was no more to be said. At last the mouse, who seemed to the person with some authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you. Sit down and listen to me. I'll make you dry enough." Then all sat down at once in a large ring, with the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt sure she could catch a bad cold if she did not get dry very soon. said the mouse with an important air. "Are you all ready? It is the driest thing I know. Silence all around, if you please." William the Conqueror, whose cause was favored by the Pope, was soon submitted to the English, who wanted leaders. And if it had been late much accustomed to the usurpation and conquest, Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, ugh, said the Lorry with a shiver. "I beg your pardon," said the mouse, frowning very politely. "Did you speak?" "Not I," said the Lorry hastily. "I thought you did," said the mouse. "I proceed. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, declared to him, and even to Stigand, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable. "Found it what?" said the duck. "Found it," the mouse replied rather crossly. "Of course you know what it means." "I know what it means well enough, when I find a thing," said the duck. "It's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find?" The mouse did not notice this question, and hurriedly went on. "Found it advisable to go with Edgar Atheling to meet William and offer him the crown. William's conduct at first was moderate, but the insolence of his Normans. How are you getting on now, my dear?" it continued, as it turned to Alice. "As wet as ever," said Alice in a melancholy tone. "It doesn't seem to be dry at all." "In that case," said the dodo, solemnly rising to its feet, "I move to this meeting adjourn, with a more adoption of a more energetic remedy." "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't understand the meaning of half of those long words, and what more, I don't believe you do either." And the eaglet bent down its head to hide a smile. Some of the other birds tittered audibly. "I was going to say," said the dodo in an offended tone, "was the best thing to do would be to dry us all by a caucus race." "What is a caucus race?" said Alice. Not that she much wanted to know, but the dodo had paused, as if thought somebody ought to speak, and no one else seemed to be inclined to say anything. "Why," said the dodo, "the best way to explain it is just to do it. And as you might like to try this thing yourself some winter day, I will tell you how the dodo managed it. First, it marked out a race course, in a sort of circle. The exact shape doesn't matter, it said. And then all the party were placed along the course. Here, there was no 1, 2, 3 and away, but they began running down as they liked, left off where they liked, and so that it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running for about a half an hour or so, and were quite dry again, the dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over," and they all crowded around it, panting. "But who has won?" This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought, and it stood there for a long time with one finger pressed upon its forehead, the position which you usually see Shakespeare in pictures of him, while the rest of them waited in silence. At last the dodo said, "Everyone has won, and all must have prizes." "But who is to give the prizes?" quite a chorus asked. "Why, she, of course," said the dodo, pointing to Alice with one finger, and the whole party crowded round her, calling out in a confused way, "Prizes, prizes, prizes!" Alice had no idea what to do, and in despair she put her hand into her pocket and pulled out a box of confits. Luckily, the salt water had not got into it, and she handed them out round as prizes. There was exactly one apiece all round. "But she must have a prize herself, you know," said the mouse. "Of course," replied the dodo very gravely. "What else have you got in your pocket?" It went on, turning to Alice. "Only a thimble," said Alice. Hand it over, said the dodo. And they all crowded around her once more, while the dodo solemnly presented the symbol, saying, "We beg your acceptance of this elegant thimble." And when it had finished the short speech, they all cheered. Alice thought the whole thing was very absurd, but they all looked so grave that she did not dare laugh, and she could not think of anything to do, so she simply bowed and took the thimble, looking as solemn as she could. The next thing was to eat the confits. This caused some noise and confusion, as the large birds complained that they could not taste theirs, and the small ones choked and had to be patted on the back. However, it was all over at last, and they sat down again in a ring and begged the mouse to tell them something more. "You promised to tell me your history of said Alice. "Why you hate C and D," she added in a whisper, half afraid that it might offend again. "Mine is a long, sad tale," said the mouse, and sighing. "It is a long, sad tale, certainly," looking down at wonder at the mouse's tail. "Why do you call it sad?" And she kept puzzling. About this, the mouse was speaking, and her idea of the tale was something like this. Furry said to a mouse that he met in the house, "Let us both go to the law. I will prosecute you. Come, take no denial. We must have the trial. For really, morning, I've nothing to do," said the mouse to the cur. Said a trial, dear, with a dear air, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be the judge, I'll be the jury, and cunning old fury, I'll try the whole thing causes, and condemn you all to death. "You're not attending," said the mouse severely. "What are you thinking of?" "I beg your pardon," said Alice very humbly. "I've gotten to the fifth bend, I think." "I had not," cried the mouse sharply and very angrily. "A knot," said Alice, always ready to make herself useful and looking anxiously about her. "Oh dear, let me help you with it." "I shall do nothing of the sort," said the mouse, getting up and walking away. "You must not insult me with such nonsense." "I did not mean it," pleaded poor Alice. "But you're so easily offended, and the mouse only growled in reply. "Please come back and finish your story," Alice called after it, and all the others joined in a chorus. "Yes, please do." But the mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked a little quicker. "What a pity it wouldn't stay," said the Lory, as soon as it was quite out of sight, and an old crab took the opportunity of saying to her daughter, "Ah, my dear, let this be a lesson to you never to lose your temper." "Hold your tongue, ma," cried the young crab, a little snappishly. "You're enough to try the patience of an oyster." "I wish I had Dinah here. I know I do," said Alice aloud, addressing nobody in particular. Soon she'd soon fetch it back. "Ah, and who's Dinah, if I might venture to ask the question?" said the Lory. Alice replied eagerly, for she was always ready to talk about her pet cat. "Dinah's our cat." And with that, she said she's one capital one at catching mice. You can't think. And oh, I wish you could see her after the birds. Why, she'd eat a bird as soon as you look at it. This speech caused a remarkable sensation among the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once. One old magpie began wrapping itself up very carefully, remarking, "I really must be getting home. The night air doesn't suit my throat." And a canary called out in a trembling voice to its children, "Come away, my dears. It's high time you were all in bed." On various pretexts, they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. "I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah," she said to herself in a melancholy tone. "Nobody seems to like her down here. I'm sure she's the best cat in the world. Oh, my dear Dinah, I wonder if I shall ever see you any more." And here poor Alice began to cry again, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. And in a while, however, she again heard a little voice and little pattering footsteps in the distance. She looked up eagerly, half expecting, hoping the mouse was changed his mind and was coming back to finish his story.